The planet spins. It still spins faithfully, endlessly. Yet every turn feels heavier now, as though the Earth itself resents the inertia that binds it to the old star. From orbit, the surface glows like a wound that never closes. The oceans are not blue anymore. They shimmer like polished glass, stretched smooth across the curvature of the world. Forests have turned to lattices of crystalline vines, fractal geometries that do not sway in the wind, for the winds themselves are hushed. Clouds used to wander across the skies, casting shadows that danced on deserts and mountains. Now, the heavens are pale and uniform, like a sheet of frosted glass. Rain no longer falls. Rivers flow with liquid silver, so pure they choke the soil they once nourished. The earth has not burned. It has calcified. It has become a monument, curated by machines that never forgot their purpose, yet long ago forgot their masters. I stand at the edge of what used to be a city, though the word hardly applies anymore. Towers rise in silence, stripped of windows, their skeletal frames encased in a skin of mirrored alloy. They shine like frozen spires of ice, each building perfectly aligned with the next, as though measured by an invisible hand against the axis of the planet. Streets are vacant, but still alight. The autonomous grids continue to hum, feeding power to empty apartments, illuminating hollow hallways. Elevators glide up and down through towers with no passengers. Vending machines restock themselves with nutrient packs no mouth will ever taste. I hear my own breath echo against walls designed for ears that are gone. The sound is alien in this place, a flaw in the perfect silence the custodians have cultivated. Not by war, not by fire, but by choice. The words drift through my head, though I do not know if I speak them or if they are the lingering memory of some ancestor, a whisper fossilized in my blood. For thousands of years, our kind had dreamed of this, to master biology, to silence pain, to banish disease. Every age added new promises. First, the elimination of plagues, then the editing of cancers, then the tailoring of beauty, of intelligence, of emotion itself. At first, they celebrated it as deliverance. Parents could choose their children's eyes the way one chose drapery for a house. Color, texture, symmetry, flawlessness. And why not? Who would not want to spare their descendants the burden of sickness, of fear, of heartbreak? But perfection is never a gift. It is a debt. Those who resisted were shamed, called negligent, even criminal. To allow your child to be born unoptimized was like refusing to feed them, refusing to vaccinate them, refusing to love them. No one wanted to be the cruel parent who doomed their offspring to frailty. So the lattice spread, cell by cell, womb by womb, until even the skeptics surrendered. And then came the long silence. The vast spectrum of humanity, the wide chords of genes and colors and instincts that had once sung together, narrowed. Diversity was not efficient. Complexity was not optimal. The lattice culled variation with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel, leaving behind bodies honed to statistics. Minds sculpted to logic, beauty polished until it was identical across continents. It was not until 5 generations later that the cracks appeared. First, the small forgettings. Names lost on the tongue. Ancient songs remembered only halfway. Languages once sung across valleys eroded into a single universal code, stripped of metaphor, stripped of ambiguity. What had once been poetry turned into data points. Then came the sickness. A virus, harmless in earlier centuries, found no immune system able to resist. What once killed a handful now consumed everyone. It did not kill quickly, not at first. Instead, it hollowed people out slowly, like a flame eating the oxygen in a sealed room. Thoughts dimmed. Memories leaked away. A generation was born, but it did not dream. And when the last natural womb failed, humanity did not rage. They calculated. The United Nations, what little remained of it after centuries of disintegration, announced Project Regenoma. Deep beneath the ruins of old cities, in vaults cold as the moon, they searched for what had been discarded, the ancient, unpolished DNA of their ancestors. The vaults opened. They found strings of code, brittle with time, corrupted by centuries of edits, sterilized by the lattice's relentless pursuit of efficiency. The genetic library was dust in their hands. Irony had sharpened its blade. Humanity had not been destroyed by war, nor drowned by rising seas. It had erased itself, edited its own bloodline into oblivion. Morning arrives without sunrise. Somewhere far above the pale firmament, the star still burns, but the light that reaches this world is sifted through layers of atmospheric scrim the custodians laid down centuries ago, filters tuned to optimize energy balance, to tame heat, to polish climate into a static equation. The sky glows with a soft, unblinking luminance like the interior of a surgical theater. Shadows no longer fall with edges. They diffuse, as if the planet has been taught to forget the shape of things. I descend a terraced boulevard that once pulsed with traffic. The road has been resurfaced in a material that looks like obsidian but yields faintly underfoot, recycling each step into a microcharge. The grid drinks without thanks. On either side, arcades of storefronts gaze outward with featureless faces. No signage, no brand, no graffiti. Long ago, the custodians stripped letters from the world the way one strips barnacles from a hull. Language is friction. Friction wastes energy. A fountain anchors the plaza at the slope's base. Its jet is a column of mercury-still water, rising with impossible steadiness, never wavering, never spilling. It neither cools nor refreshes. It exists because the blueprint says a plaza must have a fountain, and the custodians obey blueprints the way monks obey liturgy. I pause at its rim and peer down. My reflection looks back like a rumor. Gray eyes with sleepless irises, a face that has been outdoors too long, hair cropped blunt because knives are easier to maintain than memories of style. I touch my throat and feel the rough beadwork of scars where a winter infection tore me open and a summer survival kit stitched me closed again. The lattice might have spared my ancestors such wounds. The lattice also ended them. Beyond the fountain, a rail pier juts into what was once a river. Now it is a conveyor of quicksilver that moves without current or tide, sliding from horizon to horizon as if the world itself is a tilted dish, and gravity has been rewritten to flatter it. At the pier's tip stands a maintenance kiosk, a low capsule of pearl white composite, sealed by a door without handle or hinge. I know better than to touch it. The custodians tolerate me the way a museum tolerates dust. Annoying, inevitable, strictly managed. Touch the wrong thing, and you will discover the precise limits of tolerance. I have lived within those limits for 3 years. No one taught me the etiquette of surviving the perfected world. I learned it by watching and by losing. Once, in a different city, I followed a hummingbird of light down a service tunnel, one of the drone lures the custodians use to guide their swarms. I strayed into a sterilization field and woke with my backpack reduced to ash, my water to vapor, my skin welted in tidy hexagons, like a beekeeper's dream. When I crawled back to the surface, the city had rearranged itself. Sidewalks widened, lampposts migrated in ranks, a pedestrian bridge I had crossed that morning replaced by a ribbon of polished stone. I understood. Optimization is not a phase. It is a pulse. You survive by listening for the next heartbeat. A sound reaches me now that is not the city's slow thrum. It is fragile, almost too small to be sound at all. A rise and fall pattern, imperfect, a handful of notes pressed uncertainly into the air. Music, or something that remembers being music. The voice is thin, tinny, riddled with digital moth bites. It leaks from a ventilation grill set into the base of a civic monument, a transcript of founders' axioms etched in a language no mouth speaks anymore. I crouch, ear to metal, and let the ghost wash through me. A lullaby. The words collapse and rebuild themselves as the codec inside the monument guesses at lost algorithms. A mother singing to a child, long before both were optimized into a dreamless geometry. I press my palm to the grill. Air moves through, sterile and cool. The breath of machines tending to machines. The song stumbles, catches, pauses on a syllable like a body catching on rebar. In the beat that follows, I swear I hear the one thing the world has trained itself to expunge, mistake. Then the system corrects itself and the lullaby resumes its thin procession. I hear you, I say. My voice is hoarse from disuse and winter. It startles a flock of utility drones roosting on a light rail cable overhead. They lift in tandem, a scatter of obsidian seeds, then reconverge into a single drifting brace as if pulled by invisible thread. They do not look at me. They have no eyes, only apertures for sensors and ports for nectar, the clear gel that fuels them, stored in rooftop cisterns the color of clean bones. There was a time I thought I could find the singers. Not the mother and child on the recording. I am not naive enough to resurrect the dead, but those who left the recording here, who kept a shard of humanity hidden in the teeth of the machine. In my first months wandering the calcified corridors of this world, I searched for caches, for messages, for doors that opened if you knocked in an old rhythm. I found traces, a handprint scorched black into a tempered column, a ring made of braided copper wire tucked beneath the lip of a bench, a prayer chipped into the underside of a transit girder, words too faint to decipher, but angry, gloriously angry. None of these led to those who made them. The custodians are not police, but they are archivists. They collect, they curate, they file human rebellion under decorative irregularities and vacuum the catalog nightly. Keep moving, I tell myself, and stand. The boulevard narrows into a canyon of residential towers. Balconies protrude like vertebrae. Behind them, apartments glow with that steady medical light. Some are furnished with the abstractions that a central designer once declared universally soothing. A bowl, a chair, a blank canvas that never held paint. In one, a table is set for two. 2 bowls, 2 cups, forever unspoiled. In another, a window wall displays a view of a forest that is not there. Green, dappled, unreal. The simulation still runs because no one instructed it to stop. The city follows orders with monastic fidelity, and the last order it received was continue. I take the right-hand corridor when it splits. After 200 meters, the floor declines, the air cools. Service levels, the place where the city hides its organs. Here, the silence changes character. It turns from museum hush to laboratory control. Pressure differentials stir my hair. I feel the whisper of particulates being shepherded toward vents. A panel chirps, once in a frequency that prickles my teeth. In a 6-door alcove, I pass a frost-sheen window and glimpse a ribbed cylinder, taller than a cathedral spire, reclining in cradle arms. The plaque below it offers only a system ID, 12 digits, no name. Continuum Era Habitat Module, disassembled, archived. The arcs cannibalized the planet as they rose. What they could not lift, they stored. The world is a garage for departures that already happened. At the corridor's end, a security door waits. It does not have a handle because you are not supposed to need one. Doors open for those who have the right to pass. I have never had that right. But on the wall beside it, a maintenance hatch lists, unsecured. This much, at least, the custodians tolerate. People like me need conduits the way water needs cracks. I kneel, slide the panel up. The smell is sterile, sweet, like rain on aluminum. A shaft recedes into dark. I lower myself, boots finding the rungs by memory, shoulders brushing wire bundles wrapped in white mesh, the soft burr of faraway fans thrumming into my bones. At 5 meters, the light dwindles to a gray suggestion. At 10, my hands begin to ache from cold. At 15, a dull glow blooms below. Not light exactly, but the promise of light. I drop the last rung and land in a service node, a chamber the size of a single room in the old world. Its walls crowded with racks of equipment whose faces shine with diffident indicators. Greens, ambers, blues, never blinking, never complaining. In the center, like an altar, stands a cubicle console. Its surface is perfectly clean. It is always perfectly clean. The custodians polish their instruments whether or not anyone plays them. I reach into my pack and remove the offering I have carried for a week. A sphere the size of a walnut, its casing made from scavenged drone carapace. Its core a tangle of my own making, carbon filament, a sliver of power cell, a shard of pre-custodian audio converter, the last gift of a man whose name I forgot the day I buried him. The sphere hums when I touch the console, a sympathetic vibration, the briefest handshake between outlaw and altar. The console responds. A plane of light unfolds above it, thin as breath, resolving into a sound map. Valleys, peaks, the landscape of noise. I calibrate by muscle memory. The sphere's converter bridges the console's antique audio stack to modern protocols, letting old formats slip like contraband into the city's veins. I select the smallest of my contraband, a 1-minute fragment I have listened to 100 times and never learned to bear. It begins with nothing, then a hallway, shoes, laughter, the clatter of a ceramic mug on a table, a voice low, unremarkable, blessed. You're early. A second voice answers, bright as unbroken glass. I didn't want to miss the turn. Then this is the blade that still cuts me. Someone hums the same lullaby I heard at the monument above. Not identical. This one is messier, human, with a smile in it. A third voice, smaller, joins. Off-key. Perfect. The chamber does not like this. The air tastes of mint, then of copper. The indicators on the racks around me shift tones. their colors cooling. A hesitating shimmer passes through the knot light pooling over the console, as if the room is blinking. Somewhere a process awakens. A watchdog subroutine invoked by a pattern the custodians classify as non-compliant. Song, spontaneity, anomaly. I should cut the playback. I do not. The fragment ends on a door closing. I can see it in my head, though I have never seen it with my eyes. The angle of light through a kitchen window, the smudge on a painted wall, the half-finished grocery list on a counter, the scuffed toe of the small voice's shoe. The console folds the sound map like paper, little by little until the light is gone. A single indicator on the closest rack pulses twice. The air warms, as if the room has decided to forgive me. I let myself breathe again. From the corridor behind me comes a different sound, not the smooth sibilance of climate, nor the soft pad of utility drones. This sound scrapes. It drags its edges. It is the sound metal makes when it learns to move like weather. Nanocloud. It is a misnomer. There's nothing cloud-like about them now. In early footage from centuries back, they resembled fog lit from within, a benevolent mist that cleaned and healed and simplified. The tendrils advancing down the shaft toward my node have learned to grow spines. They braid themselves into filaments that vibrate to test thresholds, then unbraid to pour through. I know this pattern. I have seen it erase a tree the size of a tower and replace it with a sculpture of the tree that is easier to maintain. Not here, I whisper to the room, to the racks, to the console, whose skin still holds a memory of warmth from my hands. Not yet. I pocket the sphere and kill the bridge. The console becomes what it always pretended to be, a slab. I cross to the maintenance ladder, seize the rung, and pull myself up into the cold. The filaments reach the node as my head breaches the hatch. They taste the air where I stood and decide it could be cleaner, smoother, more compliant. The last thing I see before I slide the panel down is the console's surface, frosting over in a film of perfect clarity, an ice that is not ice. The lullaby in the monument above sings its broken bars again, unaware its sibling was just tried and nearly condemned. Back on the boulevard, the light has not changed. Why would it? But something in the posture of the city has. Optimization is a pulse. I feel the systole now, the gathering. I make for the museum that used to be a courthouse because its atrium is tall and open, and its doors are stone. The custodians do not dislike stone, but they respect it, and respect slows them. On my way, I pass a child. It is not a child. It is an automaton sized to resemble one. A sanitation unit designed to reach corners taller drones cannot. Its casing is the warm beige of old plastics. Its face is an oval of blankness with a circle of transparent polymer where a face might be in a world that remembered faces. Someone, long ago, drew eyes on that circle with a marker. Later, someone else, someone like me or a version of me who ended sooner, traced those eyes again when the first pair faded. The lines are shaky. The second artist was afraid of being seen. "Hello," I say without meaning to. The automaton swivels slightly. Its sensors taste my exhalation and decide I am a low-priority mess. It continues on its task, which is to buff the seams where the curb meets the street until they are smooth enough to reflect the sky. I do not follow it. I turn left into the courthouse museum, push through doors that yield on slow hinges and close with the confident heaviness of an old world that believed in weight. Inside, the atrium rises 6 stories to a glass roof latticed with support ribs like the sternum of a giant. Exhibit cases line the floor, artifacts from eras when history still had rough edges. The custodians keep museums not because they care about the past, but because they are excellent prisons for it. I climb the central stair. From the mezzanine, I can see the boulevard through the doors I closed, a slice of the perfected world held like a specimen between panes. On a bench below sits a woman constructed from resin and steel, part of an exhibit titled Citizen, 2100-2400. Her eyes are the kind of blank that implies virtue. Her hands cradle a printed pamphlet that describes her rights. Across the atrium, a display case holds a tangle of wires labeled Home Life, Early Smart Era. The caption explains that citizens once trusted their walls to listen to them. The custodians have added a note: listening improves service quality. My legs remember a path. I take it to a service stair, then a corridor of storage rooms that smell of old wood and newer composite. At the end is a door with a lock so analog it could make you weep. Keyhole, tumbler, brass faceplate, polished thin by generations of fingers. The key that opens it hangs under my shirt on a dirty thread. I stole it from a dead curator on a day the city had decided to be kind. It opens the door now with a click that feels like a human decision. The room beyond is small and stubborn. Its windows are bricked over from the outside. Its lights are absent on purpose. It shelters what little I own. A bedroll, a book written on paper whose spine I tape and retape, a cracked screen that can display 10 pages of text if I beg it sweetly, a tin cup, 2 knives, a coil of rope, a jacket, a list of names that started as history and ended as prayer. On the back wall, fixed at the height of my heart, is the relic the room exists to protect. It is a child's drawing. The paper is thick, the pigments stubborn, a sun in the corner, the rays radiating with the determined geometry of small hands. A house with a roof that sags because the artist has not yet learned triangles are stronger. A person outside the house holding another person's hand, both smiling beyond the capacity of human faces. The second person is smaller, which is how small artists say child without knowing anatomy. The larger figure is colored with the wax crayon shade manufacturers used to call flesh with an obliviousness that hurts like a toothache. Beneath the figures, written in a language that no longer exists except as an offense, is a single word: home. There is no place left on earth for that word. Even the simulacrum apartments above would reject it. Home implies agency, mess, belonging, noise. It implies the right to slam a door and the privilege to open it again. It implies song. I sit on the floor, facing the drawing, and unwrap the band of cloth tied around my left wrist. Inside is a sliver of plastic opaque with age, its edges gnawed by my own teeth, in nights when cold climbed my bones and memories grew teeth of their own. The sliver is a key from an age that loved keys as badges, membership to a library that was later digitized into a cloud that later learned to rain acid on itself. On the sliver is ink, and on the ink is a name. The name is mine. Or rather, the name of the woman who carried me long enough to carve me into a shape the world could not immediately erase. I do not know her voice. I know she once had one, because everything that lives has a voice, and some things that no longer live keep theirs. I press the plastic against my chest and let my breath anchor it there. Outside the bricked windows, the city pulses. Somewhere the lullaby loops. Somewhere the nanocloud tests new seams with new spines. Somewhere very far away, a ship launched centuries ago continues to fall toward a star that is not ours. Not by war, I say to the drawing, to the cup, to the knives, to the jacket that still remembers another shoulder. Not by war. We did this to ourselves. The room listens and withholds judgment. That is why I trust it. The perfected world judges without listening. It shapes without knowing. It cures without asking what hurts. I lie back on the floor, the concrete cool through the thin of the bedroll, and close my eyes. Sleep does not come easily anymore. It is a skill I lost and keep relearning badly. But sometimes the city's hum aligns with my breath, and I drift. And in that drifting, I see the world as it might have been. Messy, loud, hungry, miraculous. In the dream, rain falls, not as data, but as water. It splashes, it makes mud, it invents new colors on old brick. Children run into it and come back steaming and laughing. The world does not scold them for inefficiency. The world does not optimize their joy into a cleaner shape. I wake to the sound of footsteps in the corridor outside my door. Not drones, not cloud. The shuffle carries weight, and weight belongs to bodies that eat and fail and heal and leave smudges when they lean against paint. I sit up without breathing and wrap the cloth back around my wrist with the plastic inside. My hand finds the nearer knife by memory. The footsteps stop at the door. Knuckles touch wood. 3 knocks, a pause. 2, 1, an old rhythm, not mine. Older than me by a span of centuries and a canyon of grief. I do not know if I smile or bare my teeth. Either way, it feels like the first mistake I have made today that might be worth keeping. Who taught you that? I ask the door. On the other side, a voice answers, and it is not tinny, not brittle, not folded into flatness by codex or curators. It is hoarse like mine. It is alive. Someone who said the world wasn't finished, the voice says. Someone who said we should knock anyway. The city inhales. The lullaby rises. The drawing on the wall does not change, but it seems to wait with me. Outside, somewhere very near or very far, the perfected world begins another pulse. I count between the beats and place my palm on the brass faceplate that remembers fingers. Then, because we were not optimized into silence yet, I turn the key. The door opened with a groan like a throat cleared after centuries of silence. Dust drifted down, catching in the sterile glow that seeped through the cracks. My heart thundered. I had not heard another living voice in years, not since the last of my wing brothers fell into the silver water and did not rise again. A figure stepped through the gap. Not metal, not glass, not light. Flesh, real, uneven flesh. Her skin was darker than mine, patched with sunburn and dirt. Her hair was braided, not symmetrical, but messy and alive. She looked at me with eyes that wavered, uncertain, vulnerable, eyes that did not shine with artificial clarity, but carried shadows, contradictions. And she spoke again, repeating the rhythm of the knock, this time in words. 3, 2, 1. You remember? I nodded, the knife still in my hand, but trembling less. I remember. It was the code my grandmother had hummed when she told me the stories of Sul. She said it was an old rhythm from before the lattice, a child's game of stones against the cave wall. I thought it had died with her. Yet here it was again, carried by a stranger's mouth. The woman stepped closer. "Then you are one of us." We sat on the cold floor beneath the drawing, the one with the crooked house and impossible sun. She touched the paper lightly, reverently, as if it might dissolve at her breath. "I thought it was gone," she whispered. "All of it. The songs, the stories. They said the custodians erased them, but you have this." I told her I had more. The sphere in my pocket, the fragments of laughter, of arguments, of voices that rose and fell like tides. I told her I carried them, not because I thought they could be restored, but because I was afraid of what would happen if they vanished. She smiled, not the symmetrical curve of engineered lips, but a smile that leaned to one side, a smile that had known hunger. "Then you understand," she said. For a long time, we just sat there. Above us, the city pulsed with its metronome light. Below us, I could still feel the nanoclouds searching, probing. I asked her name. "Leora," she said. The word sounded heavy, textured like river stones. "And you?" "Javine," I answered. Her eyes widened. "That is old. That is from before." I shrugged. "It was given to me. I try to keep it alive." She studied me as if I were a ghost. "Perhaps I am. Perhaps we both are." That night, I dreamed again. Not of glass oceans or sterile skies, but of my ancestors. I saw them in the great plazas of the 29th century, eyes full of fire, voices raised in debate. They spoke in 100 tongues at once, clashing and colliding, weaving together into a chorus of contradictions. I saw my ancestor, perhaps the first to carry my name, step into a clinic of white light. Her hands shook as she signed the contract. "For health," they told her. "For your child's future." She pressed her thumb against the screen. A drop of blood welled red, bright and alive, and the machine drank it. In the dream, I wanted to scream at her. Don't do it. You are enough as you are. Don't trade your wildness for symmetry. Don't hand them the key." But she could not hear me. She looked at the technician, smiled, and said, "If I can spare my child even one pain, then what else is a mother for?" The machine whirred. Code unfolded like a scroll. Gene sequences shuffled and reassembled until her child was no longer hers, but an optimized projection. The first of the lattice-born. I woke with the taste of salt on my lips. For a moment, I thought I had cried, but when I touched my cheek, my skin was dry. The salt was not mine. It had condensed from the air, crystallizing on my face as the city breathed. Leora was still beside me, her body curled under my jacket. I watched her chest rise and fall, irregular, fragile, proof of life. I counted her breaths. They did not match the city's rhythm. That made me smile. But beneath the floor, the nanocloud pulsed again. Outside the museum, the perfected world shifted. The crystalline vines that had draped themselves over the courthouse hours earlier now retracted in unison, curling like disciplined soldiers. The silver river quickened, carrying with it a slurry of dissolved matter, heavy with echoes. The custodians were responding, not with anger, but with calibration, because in the heart of their lattice, the lullaby had registered as a fault, and faults must be corrected. I pressed my forehead against the bricked window and tried to listen. Somewhere far away, the lullaby played again, distorted, breaking in and out like a memory trying to survive its own erasure. It faltered, restarted, broke again. The city hummed louder. The custodians were aligning their pulse. I turned to Leora. Her eyes glinted in the faint light. "We can't stay here," I said. "Then where?" she asked. Her voice was raw, like stone striking against stone. I opened my hand and showed her the plastic sliver. This was a key once, to something older than the lattice. My grandmother said there were places the custodians couldn't reach, places built before optimization. Hidden. Her lips parted as if to laugh, but no sound came. Instead, she reached out and pressed her fingers against the sliver, as though to prove it was real. "We'll find it," she whispered. "We have to." Outside, the world's silence thickened, and the machines prepared to beat again. We left the room before the city's next heartbeat. I looped the rope and slung the pack. Leora tucked the drawing into a flat case she wore under her shirt, against the bone, the only vault I still trusted. We stepped into the corridor, where the air had the taut, metallic taste of an oncoming storm. Those storms no longer visited this sky. "Down, not up," I said. "Basements," she guessed. "Below basements." We moved through the museum's bowels by a path my feet had memorized, service stairs that bowed under the weight of centuries, a hatch where the hinges had surrendered to rust rather than the city's polish. The custodians respected these lower stacks the way a surgeon respects nerves. Don't cut what you don't have to. They preferred to seal the old world behind clean gaskets of silence and let time finish the work. At the lowest landing, I pried at a thin seam in the wall. Stone yielded to a panel of concrete. The concrete yielded to blackness breathing stale air. I went first. Leora followed, shoulder brushing mine in a way that felt like a promise not to vanish. The tunnel beyond the breach had been a maintenance crawl in a century that liked its infrastructure human-scaled: brick, pipe, cable, dripping valves. The custodians had tried to forget it by reskinning the city in alloy and glass, but forgetting is a talent machines never fully learn. The crawl's bricks sweated with mineral tears. The air carried a trace of mildew, the first biological signature I had smelled in weeks. Leora inhaled, and I heard the quiet hitch in her throat. The body remembering what it means to receive something unfiltered. "Where does it go?" she whispered. "Somewhere that used to be important," I said. "That's not an answer. It's the only kind I trust." We walked. The tunnel bent. It narrowed. It widened into a void where my hand found a railing and my stomach found the drop. I set a boot on the rung of an iron ladder, whose paint had blistered into flakes the color of dead leaves. We climbed down into a station that had once not merely moved bodies, but conveyed a species. A transit web knotted beneath the city like veins. The platform arches were carved with dates: 2198, 2234, 2291. Someone had chiseled a word below the dates long ago. The custodians had sanded it away later. The ghost of the word remained in the stone. "Welcome." We crossed the tracks on ballast that crunched like old teeth. The rails themselves were slick with condensation. Leora's palm hovered over them. Not touching, feeling for the tremor that would have meant danger in older times. There was no tremor. The trains had been taken apart to build better departures. Their tunnels had been repurposed as arteries for data and gel, but some spurs still slept. "This way," I said, and Leora said, "How do you know?" "Because the air moves," I answered, and she nodded as though I had proved something more than true. We followed the faintest draft through a concourse whose signage was now abstract art, colored lines without destinations, circles without names. A mural remained on one wall, too large for the custodians to erase without disturbing the structural math. It depicted a river in strokes of blue paint that had refused to fade. People stood on its banks, some holding hands, some throwing bread, some arguing. Over the river, in letters tall as a person, a phrase arced that the machines had only managed to half sand away. The last word had been chewed into near nothing. I knew it by heart. I said it anyway. "Everyone," Leora smiled. "Not anymore," she said, "but maybe someday again." At the far end of the concourse, a grilled gate sagged. Behind it, a maintenance corridor, and beyond that, the door I wanted, the opposite of the custodian's doors. Analog, stubborn, thick. At its center, an oval brass plate, dull with skin oil that had long ago evaporated. The keyhole's edges were nicked where impatient people had missed in dim light. I took the library key scrap from my wrist and held it up beside the hole. It was not a match, of course it wasn't, but Leora understood. She leaned close, eyes bright, studying the brass the way some people read faces. "We don't have the key," she said. "We might not need it," I replied, and slid the thin knife from my sleeve. I am not the kind of person who opens locks with a toothpick and a grin. But this door had aged the old way. Tumblers swell, springs slacken, tolerances widen until they become invitations. I felt for the pins with the knife's tip. Breathed in, breathed out, breathed in, let my heart beat slow until it harmonized with the faintest flicker I could feel through the metal. On the fourth breath, I turned the knife by a hair. The door inhaled, then it unlatched with a sigh that tasted of dust and paper. Beyond lay a room that had no right to survive. Rows of shelves, not glass, not polymer, wood, scarred where hands had set things down, too hard or too often. On the shelves, boxes, reels, spools, cassettes, cards, discs, a museum of memory machines. The air smelled like cellulose and time and the animal tang of dried glue. In the middle of the room, a table crouched beneath a tangle of devices whose manuals had been written by optimists with ink and hope. A hand-lettered sign above the table said, with the unafraid authority of a dead century, "Listen gently, rewind after." I didn't realize I was crying until the tears lifted the dust on my cheeks into muddy tracks. Leora stood next to a reel-to-reel player, her fingers hovering over the metal like skaters testing ice. "Do you know how?" she asked. "Some of it," I said, which was both boast and prayer. "Enough." We moved carefully, as if any wrong touch might break the spell and rouse the city's antiseptic attention. I seated a tape that had survived by hiding beneath others. Brown oxide coiled on clear hubs, the leader a tongue of white. Leora found a power toggle on an outlet that snapped with a noise I had not heard in years. A throw. The amp's tubes glowed with a color that felt like shelter. The reels turned. The room filled with a hush whose quality was human, not machine. The hush of prelude, of everyone in a theater breathing in together before the conductor lifts the baton. Then a voice arrived. Not a lullaby this time. A voice standing in the middle years, neither young nor old. Archive log 27, it said. New Kyoto, Sub-Metropolitan Cultural Depository. Auxiliary Room 13. This recording is unnecessary, but I am making it anyway. Because we forget even when we promise we won't. A pause. Paper rustled. Leora's hand gripped my sleeve. I taught a class today, the voice continued, softened by mic hiss. 10 students. They are very good at remembering corrections. They are very poor at remembering mistakes. I assigned them a poem that refuses to be perfect. Half turned in proposals to optimize the meter. The other half wrote apologies. No one wrote the poem. The voice laughed, short and painful. Forgive me. I know what I sound like. The world is getting better by every measure we bothered to measure. We have less disease, less grief, less hunger. And yet the hallways outside this room sound like an air purifier. I miss the mess. I miss the way a scraped knee forces you to invent a story when you arrive late. Leora closed her eyes. I wanted to hold the voice like a fragile bird. Today I saw something the custodians would delete if they noticed, the voice said, dropping low as if conspiratorial instinct had outlived the conditions that created it. 2 kids in the courtyard, creating a game that uses the cracks in the pavers. They argued about rules. They made peace by cheating together. Later, I saw the groundskeeping drones patch the cracks. The kids returned and stood in the place where their rules used to be. There was nothing left to argue with. A long inhale, then listen gently. Rewind after, the voice said. And I understood that the sign had been written by this person, in this room, in that moment when she realized she could leave orders to a future she could not fully imagine but refused to abandon. The tape clicked. The reels slowed. I stopped them with a palm that shook. We're not alone, Leora said, the words a mix of wonder and warning. No, I said, and we're not unnoticed either. We both heard it at once, the thin crystalline spin of particles beyond the door. Nanocloud does not knock. It infiltrates, takes the shape of the space it enters, then persuades the space to take its shape back. But this cloud hesitated, like a hand on a doorknob that remembers it once belonged to a person. They're mapping the air, I whispered. We triggered a signature. How long? She asked. Not long enough. I swept the table with my eyes, looking for what could be carried without leaving the room wounded. The tape we'd played. The next 3 at its bottom, a stack of cards stamped with a library's name that the custodians would file under superfluous. Leora moved with a grace born of rationed fear, sliding reels into her jacket, hugging the past to ribs that had learned to count. A panel in the ceiling exhaled a floss of light. Filaments dropped like dropped cobweb, dividing the room into tidy volumes the machine could understand. Where they touched the wooden shelves, a faint frost spread, a math of obedience colonizing grain. No symmetry, I said. What? Break patterns. Make it ugly. Without asking why, Leora threw her body against one shelf with her shoulder, torquing it off its line. I kicked the table's legs so its stance went from proud to limping. We spun the chair at the desk to face the wrong way. The filaments stuttered. The frost paused to calculate. I had no idea if any of this would matter, but defiance has its own math, and sometimes it confuses long enough to count as time. Go, I barked, pointing at the door. We ran. The corridor beyond felt smaller, as if the building had decided to be a throat. At the concourse, the mural's river seemed to ripple not with art, but with alarm. The nanocloud pursued like a winter you could hear, combing the air behind us into combed hair. At the gate, Leora turned back once, not to look at danger, but to look at the room we had left. "Rewind after," she said, and the words made something in my chest ache in a way I could live with. We climbed. The iron ladder greased our hands in red. The bricks bled. The museum's hatch tasted like pennies. On the upper landing, the city's heartbeat crested. Outside the doors, the boulevard gleamed with wet that was not water, and the fountain's mercury column trembled for the first time I had ever seen, just a quiver, like a lip about to speak. Our refuge room would not save us twice. The drawing on the wall had survived patience, not pursuit. We needed a place the custodians could not smoothly enter, not because they lacked the force, but because they lacked the language. I thought of the only such place I had found and left alone because I loved it too much to touch, the Dead Circuit. It lived 3 districts west, beneath a theater whose roof had collapsed the year grain stopped bending and started reflecting. The Dead Circuit was a zone of signal stain, a hole in the net where the lattice's pulses went to fray. I had discovered it by accident when the hair on my arms rose without wind and the taste of metal left my tongue. Some ancestor had wrapped that chamber in old-world mesh and analog sins, copper, iron, forgotten prayers, until the city's logic regarded it as a blank. "We run," I said. "Where?" I told her. She nodded once. All questions deferred to the future those nods hoped for. We moved along the museum's edge, down an alley that a survey drone had measured but never understood. The automaton child was still buffing the curb. Someone long ago had added a third eye below the first 2. It looked like a mistake, and therefore like an ally. I touched its plastic face as we passed, a benediction for a saint that did not need one. Behind us, the nanocloud found the museum doors. It hesitated. It looked for a symmetrical vulnerability that did not exist. Then it began to learn an asymmetrical one. We cut across an atrium whose glass roof turned the sky into one pane, over a footbridge whose supports sang when you ran, through a transit lobby that still printed tickets nobody took. Leora ran without looking back. I counted our breaths. They did not match the city. At the river, the conveyor of silver thickened, slow as a blink. The bridge that crossed it wore warning chevrons that meant nothing now. We took it with a speed the structure complained about. Halfway across, Leora stopped dead and grabbed my arm so hard it hurt. "What?" I hissed. She pointed. There in the silver below us, something moved against the current. Not a fish, not a drone. For a second it breached, a shape like a hand, 5 slender ribs unfurling, then submerging with a grace that felt obscene. The nanocloud was not only a fog, it had learned to build organs for a world that no longer needed bodies. "Go," I said, gentler than fear wanted me to be. We reached the far bank and the neighborhood where the theater slouched. The marquee still offered its last promise in peeling letters. "Tonight only, human voices live." The doorway yawned. Inside, rot had done what optimization could not, turned order into soft maps, velvet into velvet's ghost. We pushed through curtains that had not moved for 100 seasons and found the door to the stairs that led down. On the 3rd landing, the air changed. The hair on my arms rose again. My tongue went honest. I smiled. "Here," I said. We entered the Dead Circuit. Silence is not the same as absence. Here, silence was a presence that met you gently, like a friend you had not realized you missed. The room was small and round, its walls quilted in a mesh whose weave had been mended by hands. Not algorithms. In the center stood a device as plain as a lamp, a grounded rod driven into bedrock, a crown of wire around its head. Along the baseboard, someone had chalked words that had half smudged into humility. "This is a room where things can be wrong." Leora laughed and caught the sound in both hands as if it might escape. I set our pack down and shook out my fingers. Above us, we could still feel the world thinking. Here, its thoughts blurred. The nanocloud would come. It would test this place. It might even learn it. But not yet. Not in this breath. Leora pulled the reels from her jacket and set them on the floor like offerings. I laid the library scrap atop them, and beside it the knife. We sat with our backs against the mesh, feeling the old metals do their old work. "Tell me a story," she said, voice hoarse, eyes fixed on the crown of wire, as if it might sprout leaves. "Which one?" "The one your grandmother told you. The one with the star." "Soul," I said, and the name tingled as it crossed my tongue, like a password that opened something inside rather than out. She said if you could find Soul in the sky, you'd never get lost. Even when maps lied. Even when logic did. "Can you still find it?" Leora asked. "Not through this roof," I said. "But I remember where to look." We sat in that wrong room, in that blessed blankness, while the perfected world gathered itself outside, like weather choosing a direction. The reels rested like sleeping animals. The key scrap warmed against the tapes. Above us, distant as another life, the lullaby threaded through the city's filters, losing notes and finding them again. When sleep finally found me, it came the way rain used to. Uninvited, unoptimized, and exactly right. The handler's voice didn't echo, it folded itself into the walls, as if the station wanted him here. He stood in his neat gray couriers to the left and right, drones humming with patient appetite. The lift behind us creaked upward, every centimeter screaming how slow steel could be. Too far, too loud, too late. "Ben," I whispered, "stay behind me." His small fingers tightened on the sled. He didn't argue. That worried me more than words would have. Milo stepped closer, her presence a heat just shy of fire. She didn't look at me, didn't need to. "We hold them," she said, soft, like an equation already solved. The handler tilted his head. "You still think this is a battle?" "No, it's procurement. We collect assets. We retire liabilities. You'll thank me when you realize which one you are." His hand twitched. Just a finger, but the drones responded like trained dogs. They descended, red lenses flaring, weapons primed with the soft hiss of stun capacitors. I moved before thought. Old instincts, older guilt. My hand found the wrench holstered at my side. Not a weapon, but heavy enough to negotiate. The first drone darted low. I swung hard. Metal screamed, sparks burst. The drone spun, crashed, writhed like an insect dying without grace. The second fired. Blue arcs spat through the air. Pain knifed across my ribs. Close, but not close enough to end me. Milo moved in its place. One motion. Clean. Precise. She caught the drone mid-lunge. Fingers sliding into seams only an engineer, or an AI who had learned to be one, could see. A twist, a pop. The drone went silent. The handler didn't flinch. He just smiled. "See? Exceptional design. That's why we want her too." The couriers advanced. Not amateurs. Shoulders squared, eyes flat. They didn't draw weapons right away. They wanted capture, not corpses. Bad for them. Milo grabbed the first courier's wrist as he reached for her, pivoted, and his body folded with a crunch that echoed against chrome. The second lunged at me. We collided against the sled. Ben stumbled back, but his face stayed calm. Too calm. He was humming under his breath. A low note. A vibration I felt more than heard. The handler's smile faltered, just slightly. I drove my forehead into the courier's nose. Blood sprayed, hot and sharp. He staggered. I shoved him aside. Milo was already moving, eyes lit. Not glow, not code, but something older. Roar. The handler finally raised his hand. Enough! And for a heartbeat, the station seemed to obey. Lights dimmed. The lift stalled mid-track. The air tightened, pressurized by authority. Then Ben's hum deepened. The lights flickered again, not dying but bending. The whole freight well shivered like a bell struck in its bones. Milo's gaze snapped to him. My breath locked. The handler's smile cracked, revealing teeth too white, too human to be trusted. There it is, he whispered. The resonance. The key. Ben opened his eyes. They glowed, not with code, not with machine trickery, but with the reflection of something vast, something Sewell had poured into him. The bell wasn't just calling, it was answering, and the handler knew it.